Hello, and welcome to The Right Side. The Right Side is a news talk show produced by the Taunton Republican City Committee. We strive to present local, state, and national issues that impact our community, and we welcome all points of view to foster greater understanding and awareness. We want to make it clear that the views and opinions expressed on The Right Side do not reflect the view of Taunton Cable Media Access. And now, with great pleasure, we welcome you to The Right Side for a discussion of the issues of the day.
There you go. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to The Right Side. My name is David Steinhoff, and I'll be your host. The Right Side is a conservative talk show. We're aimed at dispelling some of the rumors, bad rumors, associated with being a conservative. Tonight, we have a special guest, however. We are sponsored by the Taunton Republican City Committee, but this subject matter is dealing with something that is nonpartisan, and in my opinion, very frightening. We first want to start by just acknowledging those people in Oklahoma who have suffered so much. Our thoughts and prayers to them, and we hope that the suffering will be over soon and they will see their way to the end of this. This is an incredible situation. Our guest tonight, ladies and gentlemen, drove over 2 hours to be with us to talk about something known as Agenda 21. And if you're saying to yourself right now, what's Agenda 21? You're not alone. In fact, our guest, let me introduce David Kopacz. Thank you very much for coming so far, David.
Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be out here.
Agenda 21. I mean, it wasn't too long ago that I didn't know a thing about it. And if you had to describe it in a nutshell, go ahead and give it a try. It's hard to do, I know.
Well, in summary, basically it's a land use and environmental policy at the international level. And people who are unfamiliar with the term or even the existence of this comprehensive plan shouldn't feel too bad, because it really is rather elusive. The policies and the discussions are often, they take place not always in our communities in the bright light of day where public dialogue takes place. It's often stakeholders that chart the course of what Agenda 21 and sustainable development will be.
Now, you mentioned that it was local, national, and in healthcare we talk about something being endemic. It's local, a certain group, pandemic, worldwide. Am I right to say that this matter is more a global issue, a worldwide issue, because that is in fact part of their agenda?
Oh yes, yes. This is, as I said, it's the international policies for the environment and development. And it came to be in 1992. Of course, the groundwork was set forth prior to that, but in '92 there was an Earth Summit in Rio de Janeiro. At that time, there were several documents that came out of that particular conference. One of them was Agenda 21. The Statement on Forest Principles was another. And a lot of our climate change initiatives were spurred at that time as well.
So far, you haven't said anything too terrifying, but we'll get back to that in just a moment, Dave. Right now, if we could, Tom, I believe we can switch over to Pete on the street. If you don't know what Agenda 21 is, you're absolutely not alone. Pete had the time to go out and ask a couple people, Mr. Bruce Farrell and Jean LeClaire, the same question. Let's see what how their response was.
Bruce, are you at all familiar with the United Nations Agenda 21?
I am not.
Do you think that the United Nations asking the government, the state, and cities to sign over any sovereignty to them is something you would approve of?
I wouldn't think so.
Thank you. I'm here today with Jean LeClaire, owner-operator of General Fire Extinguisher for many years. And Jean, how you doing today?
Good, yourself?
Good, good. I just wanted to ask you 2 questions if I could. What are your thoughts on the United Nations Agenda 21 program?
I'm not sure what that's all about.
Okay, well, you're not alone. Number 2, do you have any thoughts on the United Nations Sustainable Development Program?
Not at this time.
Okay, that's the answer I'm getting. And number 3, what are your feelings on federal, state, or local government rights or citizens' rights being turned over to United Nations control?
That's a good question. I'm again not too familiar with that. What's going on with that?
Okay, and my favorite question, Gene, your General Fire Extinguisher. Now, you built it. Did anybody help you build it?
No.
No. All right. And the answer is no. Thank you very much. That's a wrap from Pete on the Street.
Here we go. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Our guest, Dave Kopacz. And like we said, two very prominent figures in the Taunton area, one a real estate developer, one owning his own business, and neither one of them had any idea what Agenda 21 is. So if you're out there and you say, I don't know, you're not alone.
It's very common. In fact, you'll find that many of your city and town planners, conservation specialists at the municipal level, even your regional planners often don't know what the underpinnings of these plans are as they come up through. So it's not surprising to see that as a reaction from people on the street.
Okay. Now, I'm going to remind people, reach out to us at www.tauntonrcc.com. It's been up on the screen. We're going to put a link to your website, Dave, so we can make sure people have a way to get in touch with you, because this is the first of what I hope to be several episodes so that we can discuss this in more depth. Locally, what are some of the names or some of the things people might hear locally that would bring to mind Agenda 21's permeating our area?
Well, a couple of things, the buzzwords that have kind of developed around Agenda 21, two of the main ones is sustainable development and smart growth. Sustainable development was actually a term that was coined by a woman named Gro Brundtland. Now, she served on the World Health Organization. She was the Prime Minister of Norway, actually served a couple of terms. And she is also the Vice President of the International Socialist Party. So what
Just so happens.
Just so happens. But also, there's an important link that we should notice there is we're pushed to engage in public-private partnerships. This is a very new thing, as regionalization is as well. And these public-private partnerships, when we sit down at a table with a bunch of partners, and the majority of these partners come from either nonprofit special interest groups or non-domestic sources from other countries, and the majority of these are socialist nations, it's not surprising that these underpinnings show up in the product plan that comes out. It has socialist overtones with respect to property rights.
Oh, we've heard that all through the campaign. Obamacare was a socialism, a socialized medicine. People didn't seem to mind. The country doesn't want it, it still makes it through. People aren't quite understanding it because in the United States, we're not socialist yet, as far as we know. You know, we still believe that. Europe has gone. Most of the countries have gone to some form of socialism. So when you're talking about their development agenda, they're already living with this, am I right? Yes, in many cases they are. And what you find in those hard, long-term socialist nations, the average income is just a couple $1,000s for the individuals there. And here in America, it's important that we understand and identify that special relationship that the individual has to property ownership. We have the individual right to own property here in America. In the socialist nation, that's not true. The land has been nationalized, supposedly for the collective. Now, what's important about this, because it works seamlessly with the free market system, is that all wealth comes, oddly enough, from that right to own property. You know, if you built a house, at some point you put some of your property up as collateral. If you put in a swimming pool, or a young family wants to put an addition on their house, they had to put up something that they worked hard for, property of theirs, to advance, even for a business to grow. It's inseparable to that right to own property and the creation of wealth. So if government winds up with controlling interest of property, of land, they'll be the only ones to extract wealth from it. I mean, we take for granted that in this country we aspire. We go to school, we try to educate ourselves, or we work hard to educate our children. Someday they'll have that job, that income, so they can buy that beautiful single-family house, maybe open that business. These are some of the things that we take for granted that aren't necessarily available to the average person in some of these socialized countries. Am I right?
Yes. And it's important to note, too, that Agenda 21 just isn't only about property and the environment. It's also Chapter 36. If someone goes and reads this 40-chapter document, they'll see that Chapter 36 talks an awful lot, sounds an awful lot like Common Core. Yeah, and that may be a topic you might want to look into in the future as well, because this is federal control of our public education, and we're almost at the end of the decade for education for sustainable development. That ends in 2015. They hope to have our public schools properly equipped, shall we say, with the materials needed to make good environmental voters and global citizens out of our kids.
I mean, one of the first steps towards social engineering, and for anybody who doesn't understand that, government typically trying to dictate and teach the society how they should respond, how they should act, and what they should be used to. Social engineering works through our schools.
Yes.
Once you get a hold of the schools, you begin to educate children. Obviously, I'm not trying to make the analogy between being a Nazi and this, but in some way,
they understood they had to have capture the mind of the youth early on.
They did. I mean, that was one of Hitler's objectives: capture the youth, permeate the schools, and then the children went home and basically told the parents, "This is what I'm being taught, and this is how we will respond."
No, parents are being purged from the public dialogue on how to properly educate their kids right now.
So for us, I mean, as the average parent, I know that if I go to a PTA meeting, right now, I may have some say. I may have some influence on what the teachers are talking about with my schools. Via this side of social engineering, we lose that right, am I correct?
Yeah, Common Core would eliminate that. No longer would a parent be effective.
And that's something we're hearing about here in Massachusetts.
Yes, yes. And it actually was just on our town warrant recently in the town I'm from, and it mysteriously was taken off at the 11th hour. But I expect it's going to be back. So I've got my work cut out for me in town. We got to get after our school committees, get them talking about this.
Just to check with the folks, Pete on the Street is going toward the end, am I correct? Thank you. All right, we have a second segment, special for Memorial Day. Again, locally, we're seeing, as I understand, bill number 1859, talking about these very same subjects right here in Massachusetts. So while legislature is hearing about this, I know I didn't know about this bill until recently, and they're talking about sustained development, programs for developmental agreements, cluster development, permit granting authority. These are all terms, and some of it doesn't sound bad. Taking some of the old mills in Fall River, Taunton, and having a certain agenda for developing those into public housing or affordable housing. It doesn't sound terrible.
No, but with that comes mixed use, for example. In my town, we have a beautiful historic mill yard.
Okay.
And we've been struggling to attract business back into this area and revitalize the economy locally. And now they come in with this mixed use, and we're now putting low-income housing in a place where we've been struggling to bring the economy back alive and to foster an environment that's attractive to small business. And we're putting people in areas that are higher in pollution, so their quality of life isn't going up, as they say. And you're going to see things like the prices of insurance go up. As you put more people into a mixed-use situation, the potential for fire increases, illnesses spread, so there's lost productivity there. So you often question the science and the facts behind this, and they often don't stand up.
Right, so what you're talking about is cluster development for affordable housing, competing with a job-creating small businesses. I mean, that's one of the primary considerations. I know in Fall River, the downtown was hit by a senior housing, nothing wrong with that, but why put them right in the downtown area? So many of them that you prevent small businesses from actually returning to the downtown area.
And what we're also seeing in CPA, this is something in Massachusetts.
CPA, which is?
The Community Preservation
Thank
Act.
you.
It allows for funding of low-income housing, open space, historic preservation, things of that nature.
But see, the historic preservation, that took off in Fall River again, my hometown. And it was put down finally, close vote. But there were some good people, friends of mine, that were for it because they had historic homes. They felt, hey, this is a great way to preserve a historical. That doesn't sound bad.
No, it doesn't, but I think there's a free market mechanism that will allow for protecting these places, because if you go through the system and the way it's set up, you know, the acquisition of one historic site and then maybe another historic site next to it eventually turns into a corridor or a viewshed or a historic district, and it quickly mushrooms and explodes. Again, I see a lot of good people whose hearts are really into it and want to preserve the environment, live sustainably. All those are very noble things to strive for. However, they're only getting part of the truth. Like I said, this is driven by stakeholder consensus meetings and visioning meetings where stakeholders are replacing the actual input from the citizens themselves.
What do you mean stakeholders?
I was recently at a workshop in Sturbridge, and this is very classic. It's a derivative of the Delphi technique, which was formulated by the Rand Corporation many years ago, and it's a way of, they realize that it's easier to persuade a group of people than it is an individual, because you could engage me on a particular subject one-on-one, and I'd have no way to divert the subject. In a group setting, they can get their stakeholders in this room who just talk in glowing praises of a particular agenda, whatever their predetermined outcome is, and they'll move the whole group around. And in this case, they come out and they had a whole bunch of flowery statements about preservation and sustainability. They had a survey that was absolutely impossible to answer. Oh, and they gave us these cute little stickers. So as we all sit down at a table, they'll say, well, you look like you might be a hunter. Is there any open wooded areas here that you like to see protected? Off comes the sticker and it goes on their map. And when the regional planners come back to us, they say, hey, we've gotten the input of the community, we've updated our maps, and here you go. Before you know it, they've got all this targeting put on a map by stakeholders.
Yep.
Now, when I went to this meeting, I circulated the room. I could not find one person that read this about that event in the paper, and there were probably 3 or 4 tables of just land trust. Very dangerous group right now. It's not like the old land trust of days gone by. This new breed of land trust are extremely dangerous, and they're being positioned to acquire land at the taxpayer expense.
If I may, bringing it down to terms that affect me now, I know that when I went to Switzerland 5 years ago, that in that economy, as I understood it, 20% of the people have the opportunity to own private property. People who do own private property have to wait so long just to get that opportunity to own a decent condo, never mind a private setting, a home, land. A German dentist that I sat down and talked with, he lived in a nice condo, a nice career, he should be able to own private property. He had to rent land from the government with friends of his in order to do some hunting. And that was a certain area up in the part of Germany that was controlled by the federal government.